Hi, this is Corey Johnston, and today's lesson is going to take place in the first chapter of the first book of the Bible, Genesis, and we already covered this range in a lesson over a year ago. We did the start and the finish of this chapter, but we didn't do it start to finish. We made it, we entitled it Genesis 1, The Case for Creation, and we also presented that in the context. One of the things we explained is that the Genesis account doesn't attempt to dismantle any other rival claimant for the origins of life and matter and existence itself, but I made the case as it presents itself, but I didn't do it start to finish. I want to approach this one in a linear sequence, and I plan on making it all the way up to the 19th verse today. We don't have an antecedent narrative context to review, so we're going to proceed because this takes in the beginning. This marks the beginning of the not only the plan of creation and redemption, but time itself and space itself and matter and everything else. We're going to follow the who, what, when, where, why, how formula. The who, creation, involved a personal deity, and he is not a person in the sense that he is a person or a human. He's a person in the sense that he has a mind that thinks, a heart that feels, and a will that acts. And he's known as Elohim. This is a plurality of beings, but it is still the same singular being. So Elohim is plural itself, and we see a Trinitarian witness in here, such as the distinct mention of the Spirit as a creator, a collaborator in the creation, but also the after the range we're going to cover, he says, let us, the plural known. So he's talking to himself. These are the three members. But most of the verbs which succeed the noun of Elohim, that's who he is, or what he is, rather, but it's also a being. Most of them are singular tense, so even though the term itself is plural, it is often presented in context which suggest a singular, more militant monotheism, and the Jews do have different interesting interpretations. We don't have time to get into the whole notion of the plurality of Elohim. The what is the creation, and so who created what he did is he created the heavens, the earth, everything on them, anything around them, and everything over them. Everything that moves, everything that breathes owes its origin and its existence to him. When this took place, if you interpret the 5th chapter of Genesis literally, time itself began 6,000 years ago, but for the sake of reference, we want to present it in the context itself, its native context, and it's just in the beginning. So this takes us to the beginning of anything. You can leave that open to your imagination for the sake of this lesson as to precisely when that is, but before anything moved, existed, or was, it was the beginning. That's where this takes place. Where it takes place in the literally everywhere. This is how everything was created. He is an omnipresent being who exists throughout the vast infinitude of these heavens and also the earth that he made it. Why? Now, the existence of creation, the act of creation, and the existence of life are not born out of any necessity, because even before the beginning, Elohim was a completely alive being, totally satisfied in himself. He's a self-existent, self-created, self-sustaining, self-sufficient being. So he doesn't do anything because he needs it. He did not, but it was motivated. The motivation and incentive for his creative impetus was love. He wanted to create specifically humans to be the crown of his creation, so that they may know and love him and spend an eternity with him. So it's really a remarkable miracle, and the miracle of creation itself transcends any more limited scoped miracle that we read of in both the Old or New Testament. And the how, now we read that he spoke anything into existence, so that is the how, and we do not know the how within the how. We cannot understand it scientifically because it is a supernatural process, but the one thing we are informed is that everything that came into being came from a process that started with him speaking. So he wishes it, and he can will it into existence by the mere sound of his voice. So the opening verse of the first chapter of Genesis in the Old Testament and the Bible itself reads, In the beginning, Elohim created the heavens and the earth. So we read when, who, and what. In the beginning was the when. We've already commented on that. Elohim, who, is the who. And created is the what. So the Hebrew word which translates as created is to create from scratch. They have another word that's used in more human context whenever else that appears, but in reference to divinity, the closest equivalent we have in the English language is ex nihilo, which is Latin for out of nothing. So bara communicates much the same thing for the creation from scratch. It means he did not have any everything that was there was nothing created before everything was created. So he exists in his infinitude, in his eternality, and the heavens and the earth. So this is the origin of 4 dimensions in the time-space continuum. In the beginning, that is the origin of time itself. Created is the energy, so that's another dimension. The heavens is space, and matter is earth. So those 4 elements, the measuring rods of existence, the dimensions within existence owe their origin to a supreme created being, and it is made clear that this was not the teamwork of a host of polytheistic pantheons, but one being in perfect union with himself. But then we read, in the next verse, we read that the Spirit was there as a distinctive agent of creation and co-collaborator, but the Jews would have thought of the Spirit, by their militant monotheism, as an extension of Yahweh himself, whereas we understand it to be the doctrine of the Spirit as a distinct divine being would not emerge until the writing of the New Testament. And the earth came to be from formless and empty, and darkness was on the face of the deep, and the Spirit of Elohim was moving on the face of the waters. So from chaos and nothingness, a formless and empty, this is in reference to the earth. So the heavens are, it's interesting because he doesn't create the heavens and the earth in that order. This is in reference to the earth, but then he moves to creating the heavens and then the earth, and then everything he forms, he eventually fills. This is the pattern of the days of Genesis that I want you to pay attention to. So, we'll get to that when we get to that, but the fact is that the Spirit was a distinct agent of creation, if we understand him to be his own being, singular in substance to Elohim, but his own person with his own individual substance. And he was moving. That word is alternately translated as hovering, and he did hover in the form of a dove at the Messiah's temptation. And we do witness the Trinity in tandem. So from the New Testament, Colossians 1, John 1, and a few other places, we learn that the Messiah was a creative agent. He was there from the beginning, before the beginning. In the beginning, the Genesis 1:1 equivalent in the New Testament is John 1:1. In the beginning was Elohim, and the Word was with Elohim, and et al., etc. But he's moving over the face of a formless, empty void for all intents and purposes, and then it reverts back to Elohim. So we don't read the covenant name of Yahweh until the 4th verse of the 2nd chapter. And Yahweh is who he is, Elohim is what he is, much as I am Corey Johnston, but what I am is a human being and a person. And Elohim said, "Let light come to be," and light came to be. So light is foundation. He is described as light. Light is one of his attributes that is more than a mere character description. It is something that can be attributed to him. So everything that is light owes its origin and existence to him. He exudes lights supernally and in superabundance, and yet he is not limited by light. So light is not the full, total essence of his totality. But he spoke it, he commanded, and it was created. He wished, and it willed itself into creation. So just like that, there is the power of miraculous potential and power in the voice of Elohim. It is the how of creation. And Elohim saw the light, and it was good. And Elohim separated the light from the darkness. So good describes everything in creation in its pristine, uncorrupted state. The problem is that the exercise of human agency in our sin creates consequences with ripple effects that are destabilizing to goodness in the pristine creative stated order. But for everything was declared good, there is no existence of bad until the serpent slithers into the garden in the 3rd chapter. And Elohim called the light day, and the darkness he called night, and this came to be evening, and there came to be day 1. So to call anything, anyone, anything is a mark of ownership, and that is one of the things that Adam is entrusted to steward. He named all the animals, everything in existence. We don't know quite what he called it, what his native language is, but in the Hebrew it would have been something different from light. But that he owns it, he creates it, he controls it, so he has the right and prerogative to call it what he wills, and he names it light in the English language, and day, and also darkness, night. That's how we understand the passage of time in our days. But the sun and the moon are created on day 4 of the creation. So before the sources of light, without which our earth could not exist, came, there was light itself. And day 1, now the Hebrew word yom translates as a 24-hour period. I personally embrace the 6-day creation theory, because literalism is my default state of mind when interpreting and exegeting the Bible. The standard I follow is, if the literal sense makes common sense, seek no other sense. So there's no metaphorical inference. Now, some people think that the process of evolution actually sprang from creation, and this would have required much more than 6 days. The evolutionary explanation places the creation and the earth as a lot older than what creationists do, according to a interpretation of the Bible. Other people, they read Psalm 94, and it's repeated somewhere in the Peters in the New Testament that a day is like 1,000 years. So he is a timeless creator. He exists above and transcends times. He is not bound by its limitations. His omnipresence spreads not only across space, that's the ability to be everywhere at once, but across time, that's to be every time at once. And he is both, his present is both past and future. So he understands and experiences time on a altogether different dimensional prism than we know and understand it. But it was a 24-hour period. That's the interpretation I embrace. And Elohim said, "Let an expanse come into being in the midst of the water, and let it separate the waters from the waters." So the expanse is the creation of the heavens. This is the sky. It's another. Now, heaven exists in 3 planes. There is the Earth's outer atmosphere, there is outer space, and then there is the presence of divinity himself. This is what Paul speaks to as the 3rd heaven in 1 Corinthians, the first 4 verses of the 12th chapter, 2 Corinthians. But he declared a separation. So before everything was formless, voidless, all the same, he sets the barriers in deciding to separate water from the waters. That means, all the oceans owe their shape and formation to him, and the expanse could have been also the landmass which was there. I may have actually read that wrong, but no choice but to move on. And Elohim called the expanse heavens, and there came to be evening, and there came to be morning, the 2nd day. So once more we find him calling the expanse heavens, and I was correct in my original projection, but I never categorically entertained the possibility that I am wrong. I do strive for consistency, but, my acknowledged error was ultimately there wasn't an error to acknowledge. But, what's interesting here is this is the morning and the evening, so that's linked with night and day, which owe their origin on day 1, but on day 2, this is the 2nd day that we find. We find that how we humanly declare our nights and days as morning and evening. These are other scales, other ways of saying essentially the same thing. And Elohim said, "Let the waters under the heavens be gathered together into one place, and let the dry land appear." And it came to be so. So waters under the heavens, this is the formation of oceans. These are massive bodies of water, and the whole entire earth under the heavens was gathered together in one place, a round ball for now and forever, when he declared it so, and he called it the sea. So before the existence of land continents, all there was the sea, and it was good, but he wanted to spice things up and change things up a little bit. So the pattern we find in the days of creation, the 6-day creative process, is day 1, the heavens are formed, and then day 4, the heavens are filled. Day 2, the sea is formed. Day 5, the sea is filled. Day 3, the earth is formed, and then day 6, the earth is filled. So we might actually cut this lesson earlier than we'll take it as is. And Elohim said, "Let the earth bring forth grass, and plant that yields seeds, and the fruit tree that yields fruit according to its kind, whose seed is in itself on the earth." And it came to be. So this is the first mention of life. Grass is distinct. Now water itself, it hosts life. The ocean hosts life, but it is not it is a life giving entity, but it is not. It is lifeless in itself. Grass has a definite life form, and they're not quite whos, so there's really no other who to acknowledge until the creation of man. Animals, we refer to them as whos. But they have reproductive capacity, so they are able to make more of the same through the process of procreation. This is our human stewardship, and our role of creation is to perpetuate life on earth by procreating and making copies of ourselves. And the same thing with all life forms. All life has the ability to reproduce and is the product of reproduction, more totally, actually. And Elohim called the dry land earth, and the collection of waters he called seas. And Elohim saw that it was good. So here's the origin of when earth came to be and came to be known as earth. And same with seas. And it was declared good because it was commensurate with his designs. It was in his pristine form. It had recently emanated from his own perfection. So in its pristine state, there is no imperfection. But he created man and angels with the capacity to disobey. And this disturbs the cosmic equilibrium, and makes that which was good no longer good. But that's where the theme of redemption, which completes creation. The story of the Bible is the story of creation and redemption. So when sin rears its ugly head in, that necessitates the path of redemption, where everything will be restored to its pristine goodness. And Elohim said, "Let the earth bring forth..." we read. "And the earth brought forth grass, the plant that yields seed according to its kind, and the tree that yields fruit, whose seed is in itself according to its kind. And Elohim saw that it was good." So they were able to obey this command. They were created. All created life form is created with the capacity and for the purpose of enduring and perpetuating its species. Now there are endangered species, but this is not the process of evolution. But, one of our mismanagement, we are entrusted to steward creation in the 2nd chapter more explicitly. And verse 13, "And there came to be evening, and there came to be morning, the 3rd day." So evening and morning, this repeats what we read in the closing verse, and there's a pattern and a consistent thing, which comes from the formula. So in the day 1, we read the origin of night and day, then evening and morning are repeated once more in the 13th and the 8th verse. "And Elohim said, Let lights come to be in the expanse of the heavens to separate the day from the night, and let them be for signs in the appointed times, and for days and years." So these lights are the heavenly celestial bodies which dot the landscape of space. There are billions of stars and even greater number of planets and lesser number of suns, but the universe is not exactly infinite, but it is expanding at a capacity beyond our capabilities of even understanding, let alone observing. The universe is constantly creating, and there are galaxies being born. Galaxies come and go if you embrace the theory that the universe is trillions of years old. But this is the sun and the moon that are there, and they are not named in this account, and that was because many of the ancient Near Easterns worshipped sun and lunar deities. Allah, the supposedly monotheistic deity of Islam, was in fact one of the lunar god. That's why the moon and the crescent is the symbol of Islam. But the Hebrews had to know that these are created things. They are not worthy of mention of name. They are differentiated by the greater and the lesser in the verse which introduces them. And let them be for lights in the expanse of the heaven, to give lights on the earth. And it came to be so. So similar process. He speaks, he commands, it's created. He wishes, he wills, it is there. This is just the vast infinitude of space, and this took place all in a day. Now, it's certainly within his capacities to complete the process of creation, but for reasons beyond our capacity to understand, he took 6 days, and that was to give the numerological significance to the number 7, which we'll get as we cover the Sabbath verse. Not in this lesson, but the lesson which comes after this. And Elohim made 2 great lights, the greater light to rule the day, and the lesser light to rule the night, and the stars. So he created the sun and the moon. The sun is the greater, that rules the day, that is our source of life and our source of life. So life could not exist without light. Light is foundational. There is a reason why everything was created in its purpose, in its order. It was for a purpose. So the whole process of creation is an intricate and wise design that we would foul up if we were even had the chance to do so. If we were giving the omnipotence to, we would just, our human limitation. That's a ultimately unrealistic hypothetical. I'm just going to return to verse 17. And Elohim placed them in the heavens to give light, and on the earth. So light, there are sources of light which are exceedingly more radiant than the sun itself, but we can't see it because it is vast light years away. So the light year theory from the evolutionary or Big Bang theory is that the speed of light is the stable constant, 186,000 miles per second. So we measure light years as in how many years it would take to get from one galaxy to another based on what one could arrive at if they were traveling at the speed of light, which is, exceptionally fast. That is the speed at which light spreads. So that's, just to give us a frame of reference for the number. And to rule over the day and over the night, and to separate the light from the darkness. And Elohim saw that it was good. So this separation was necessary and good and vital. Also wouldn't have been declared so. So everything in creation, the entire food chain and life process and struggle for survival exists in the context of night and days. So the sun gives light, and that gives life to, the plant life, for instance, but they are also reliant on the rain. So the light and water are foundational to plant life, which is foundational to animal life. So the entire ecosystem and food of chain has a perfect design within it, which we can only mar and get in the way of. But we are the dominant species. But on our report card for our stewardship, this takes us beyond the range we're going to be covering today. We do not have a flattering report card to submit to the judge. We have to answer to. And it came to be evening, and this came to be morning, the 4th day. So the 4th day is Wednesday. The 1st day is Sunday. The 2nd day is Monday. The 3rd day is Tuesday. The 4th day is Wednesday. These days are the order which began. So each day what we call Monday, what we call Sunday and Monday and Tuesday. So the seventh day is the Sabbath. That is the day in which everyone was rested. And that's when the Jews took their day off to rest and worship and gather in fellowship. But that's getting beyond ourselves. So what we've covered in the four days of creation thus far, we just want to wrap it up by noting the pattern, which will make more sense as we continue this trajectory in the subsequent lesson we plan on doing. Is that on day one the heavens are formed, and then on day 4 they are filled. All the planets and the solar systems and galaxies out there were created in a moment of time, and they're continually expanding. So there are new ones being born, maybe not exactly as we speak, but certainly all the time. And then on day 5, which we're going to cover in this lesson's sequel, we're going to witness what was filled on the second day. So the sea was formed, and it's going to be filled with fish life and just everything, and the heavens too. We're going to witness the creation of birds. And then day 3, the earth was formed, or just the earth in the sense of the continents. The continental landmass, and we witnessed that filled with animals and eventually people on day 6. That's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much. I'm so glad to see you. Take care until next time. I'll see you then. Bye-bye.